You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back to further break down some of these results from Election Day this week. Joining us on a reporters roundtable of just one is Brendan Moore with Lee Enterprises. Brendan, thank you so much for joining us.
Always happy to be with you, Cole.
So I wanted to bring you on specifically. Let's start. We're going to get into the national implications here. Former President Trump, now President-elect Trump, basically outperforming in almost every single area, every single category, his 2020 run. And we saw that in Illinois too. I mentioned this at the top of the show, but Trump he basically slashes the wins that Biden and Clinton and every other Democratic candidate for president has had in the past 25 years in Illinois, losing by only 8 points, which still sounds bad, but is extremely good for a Republican candidate. But I guess I will start there with that. I mean, what were your thoughts when you saw those numbers? Because Harris is the first Democratic candidate to not win Illinois by double digits since Bill Clinton.
Right, and we'll see when the final numbers are in. There might still be some later writing vote by mail that leans heavily Democratic, so maybe it gets closer to 10. But either way, I mean, it's really a remarkable result because Illinois has pretty consistently, at least the past 3 presidential elections, been pretty consistent at about 17 percentage point margin for the Democratic nominee. And Harris did, basically that was slashed in half. Trump slashed it in half, and he improved everywhere. I mean, the rural slide continued. He did very much better there. He did much better in the collar counties and the suburbs, about 5 to 7 points in DuPage, Will, Lake County. And then in the city of Chicago, I mean, he got 22% in the city of Chicago. First time he ran, I think it was about 12%. Last time it was about 16. So he just continues to improve in a lot of areas that quite frankly, are Democratic strongholds. And you saw that in the overall state number. And that has it can have pretty massive implications down the ballot. Democrats really have, taken some of the coattails from the top of the ticket the past few cycles to win in a lot of places that they previously, would not win, such as the suburbs. And while they kind of held their own in this election, they didn't lose any incumbents. They had a lot of targets that they were trying to seats they were trying to win from Republicans that they felt very good about, maybe taking 2 or 3 seats in the House, especially. And it appears that all those vulnerable Republican incumbents, despite being massively outspent, are probably going to return to Springfield, and they can probably thank President-elect Trump for that because he helped from the top of the ticket. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I mean, it was a very good night. The best night for a Republican in Illinois. And again, this happened in a lot of other blue states, but just really remarkable.
It's going to be quite a bit of time here before we actually get a breakdown of the numbers, the demographics, the issues, the full breakdown of what happened on the national scene. But I know when lawmakers return to Springfield next week, and we're talking to Republicans, we've already seen it from the party, from Tony McCombie. They're going to point to the economy. They're going to say, this is the issue that helped us. We're going to have the Freedom Caucus members that are going to be talking more about, the full Trump breakdown, the full Trump platform. But I know that they're going to be focusing heavily on those economic factors. It's so interesting that they just used this incredibly, frankly, historic year for a Republican Republican presidential candidate to essentially hold ground.
One of the big lessons from Tuesday night was that, again, a reminder that Democrats drew a very good map in 2021 to basically cement their supermajorities in the legislature. They gerrymandered it, and that allowed for them to kind of withstand this mini red wave in Illinois. And one thing that I heard from some people close to House Democrats was this concept of going on offense to play defense, basically going after Republican incumbents to make House Republicans spend money on those races. And so House Republicans really couldn't go on offense elsewhere. So House Republican leader Tony McCombie earlier this year had stated a goal of wanting to get 5 seats in this cycle. They held their ground. Looks like they're not going to lose any seats. She used the word victory. Speaker Welch used the word victory too in terms of defending the supermajority. I don't think either is really correct there. I mean, they fought it to a draw. And as you said, Cole, it's not going to get easier for Republicans. I mean, this was the time for them to take advantage of a very good national climate for the party, because in 2 years, as you said, Trump is going to be back in office. The midterm cycle is usually not great for the party in power, and Republicans will have unified control of the government, it appears. I mean, we're still waiting on House numbers, but they're going to have the Senate. So in theory, at least if past his prologue, that could mean Democrats have a really good year in a la 2018, in 2026. So, you know, I think, you know, and you've heard the whispers too from some Republicans saying that, you know, while they want Trump to win, they worry about 2026 because people may vote against Trump, and there's no certainty that his supporters are going to come out and vote when he's not on the ballot.
Yeah, it's what happened in 2018 was massive for the ramifications in this building, with the way that Democrats were able to make gains based on the just discussion and constant spotlight on a Trump administration. For everything that, there's all the support that's there for the economy. I really do think that's going to be the big issue, that when the polling comes out and when there's broken down and people are just going to say, look, the economy, inflation wasn't great over the past 4 years, and we didn't believe there was enough separation between maybe the Biden ticket and the Harris ticket to believe they could do something about it, or they believe that the Trump administration was better suited to move forward on that. I think the rank and file American voter will be focusing more so on that. I think that's where you get these margins that are growing from there. But once he's back in the White House, there's going to be that spotlight again. There's going to be those questions, and you could see that repeat. And the damage, the place that you hear from where Republicans are worried about it here in Illinois is the suburbs. He made gains this time around in this election. This is the kind of environment that you would expect Republicans to be able to gain ground, but they just, like you said, weren't in the position to do it. 2 years from now, when Senate Republicans are up again, when House Republicans are up again in those suburban areas, they're going to be in trouble. They're going to be on defense again. And you still have the massive bankrolls that Democrats have in this state already to continue that offense as defense approach.
The Democrats have built up such a structural advantage in this state that it allowed for them to withstand this election, and it will allow for them, again, to go on offense next time. I mean, just the fundraising, the boots on the ground. Republicans have really been outgunned, and they are not going to be in a position necessarily to I guess, fight back unless they can raise some money, and perhaps unless the national climate improves. And to your point, I mean, it is the suburbs. Like that is where the Republicans have to make inroads. And we've seen, at least in the past few midterm cycles, Democrats have done a lot better getting out higher propensity voters, college-educated voters, have really kind of become part of the Democratic coalition, and they vote in every election. Trump has done very well, and Republicans have done very well with a lot of lower propensity voters, people that maybe don't turn out in every election. And so that with a smaller turnout in a midterm year, that's going to benefit Democrats, who also have the benefit of a very gerrymandered map that was drawn in their favor, and all the money and all the volunteers, and none of that goes away. And then obviously, top of the ticket, we'll see what Governor J.B. Pritzker decides to do, but he will be up for re-election if he so chooses. And if that's the case, he's going to spend a lot of money, and that may lift some votes as well. That being said, in Springfield, there's going to be some tough conversations the next few years that might make it tough for Democrats. A lot of budget issues, conversations about maybe having to do some cuts, some tax increases. So we will see what comes out of it, and maybe how the parties, react to it and how it plays with voters.
And it'll be so interesting to see how this kind of plays behind the scenes for the Republican Party, because after this last gubernatorial election, we saw essentially the fundraising structure for the Republican Party fall apart at the top, because we had the sort of civil war of the Richard Irvin versus Darren Bailey, who's in control of the party. Behind the scenes of those two candidates was Ken Griffin and Richard Uihlein. And now just both aren't making any major donations. They both cut and ran after Pritzker just ended up sweeping in that election. Now that you see that at least at the presidential level, at least on the Trump ticket, that support eroding for Democrats in Illinois, it'll be interesting to see if they kind of come back in, or if more people try to find their way into those spaces, if they're able to build that back up and find a candidate maybe that can put up a good fight, whether it's Pritzker or another candidate. And you mentioned the tough conversations to come in these elections. There's also just not a lot of time for Republicans here before there's just another remap. I mean, we have 2 elections until it's suddenly, okay, 2030, like the 3 elections till 2030, I guess. And it's like, okay, we got another map to draw. And then from there, if they don't have more control in this building, they don't have a say in that. And then you just kind of repeat for another decade, and you see these structural advantages persist.
Right, and again, it was a major feat for them in a way to not lose any seats, given where they were on defense everywhere in this election. But then it becomes hard to see, how do you start chipping away? I mean, that's really what they have to do, because I mean, if they're at 40 again coming January, I mean, you're still, I think, 8 seats from getting out, from breaking the supermajority, 7, 8, I don't know. But leader Tony McCombie is a realist. I mean, she knows this is a multi-year, multi-election cycle endeavor that you need to chip away every time. You need to get, they would hope a candidate for statewide office, maybe a candidate for governor, that could win. It's been over a decade since a Republican has won the governorship in Illinois. And so you need basically, because they acknowledge that they probably won't take the majority back under this map. So you need a governor, and you need to break the supermajority in order to have a seat at the table when the next one is drawn in 2031.
Yeah, and then on top of that, it's about what the identity of the Republican Party is, what the lessons learned from this election end up being. Because after we saw the first Trump election in 2016, we saw this new type of Republican candidate coming up. We saw the growth of the Freedom Caucus here in this Capitol, and that's still the minority within the minority in this section. But do you see that kind of grow? Do you see those kinds of candidates pop up? Do you see the Darren Baileys running for office statewide, or do you see this sort of like maybe viewpoint from the existing Republican Party that can come in and say, maybe with this we can take a little bit of momentum from this current outcome, maybe just get our name back out there a little bit more and try to get these more moderate Republican or more traditional Republican, I guess is probably the way to go about it, to get some ground back in Illinois.
Right, and one thing I'm very interested about is, I mean, in a lot of states around the country, you had abortion rights referenda that won at the ballot, while at the same time, President-elect Trump won the state. So people were clearly voting for abortion rights and for President Trump. And I'm curious, in Illinois, a state that has enacted rights for reproductive health, if we will see more people now, because Democrats have run on abortion for the past several cycles, and it's worked. It's been successful. But now that we are getting away from the Dobbs decision and Illinois has these robust protections, does that issue go away? And can Republicans say, hey, we don't support making any changes there. It's enshrined. Let's talk about the price of groceries. Let's talk about your taxes. Let's talk about the kitchen table. And if they can do that, they can weave that, and if Trump is not the albatross that he's been in the past, then maybe you can find a winning mix there in the suburbs. Again, it'll be very hard. especially in a midterm year.
Yeah, and that's talking about that issue specifically from where we're at now with the Dobbs, in the aftermath of the Dobbs decision. The power lies in the state, with the states and everything. Mm-hmm. We're talking on Thursday. We don't know the outcome of what the makeup of Congress yet. We don't know exactly what the House is going to look like. If there's a Republican Senate, a Republican House, and Trump in the White House, you got to wonder about those larger conversations around reproductive rights and where that plays. Because as soon as there's an additional step, if there's even a conversation about a national abortion ban in Congress, where that could play well in certain states in the country, mm-hmm. that is just the biggest albatross possible in Illinois for Republican candidates. Right. That's where we get into how the National Party ends up defining the Republican Party in Illinois and just pushes them back into that corner, and they have nothing they can do about it.
Right. And Trump has said that he doesn't want a national abortion ban, and I think he recognized even more than some other Republicans what Dobbs did to Republicans in 2022 and in some other elections, that it became a big issue. And but obviously there will be people that will be wanting that, especially on the further.
This is one of those issues where there has been I'm going to say something over here and something else is going to happen this way.
Right.
So as much as we see in the campaign trail, I'm not saying that is destiny that's going to happen or whatever, but there's a little bit of, oh my gosh, we have majorities everywhere.
But to your point, and whether it's on that issue or on a host of other issues, I mean, he's more likely than not going to have unified government in Washington.
Yeah.
And that means he will have, there's still the filibuster, but he will be able to do a lot of things that probably are not going to be very popular in a Democratic state like Illinois. And, we think about, his first term, the tax cut bill, that hurt a lot of people in the suburbs because it changed some deductions, and it basically meant that people had to pay, it was the SALT reduction, I think. So I'm curious to see what will be this time, because again, they have a mandate to govern. They swept. It appears they're going to sweep Congress and the presidency, and what's the reaction going to be in a place like Illinois?
Yeah, and the other thing, I guess there's the boons of unified government. The drawback is that there is nobody else to blame. And that'll be something that's so interesting to watch in the midterms as well, because while the presidency won't be up, we saw what happened in Congress over the past 2 years especially. It just deadlocked the entire way through. And then you see this unification. You saw the deadlock, and there was still so much pinned on the Biden administration. It's just like in Illinois. You have a governor's own. That phrase, it's the same concept across the board. There's nowhere else to really point fingers in D.C. if there's a unified government, which then can trickle down and get into Illinois politics. And we've seen how Democrats here have spent so much time defining the Republic. There's been no definition. There's been no successful campaign to really prove what the Republican Party is in Illinois by Republicans. It's been a lot of here's what it is by Democrats, and that, I don't know, I think that's just going to continue, and it's going to be very difficult to get out of it if you're in the super minority here and then have the unified government in DC.
Yeah, this was the year. This was the year if you were going to do something, make some electoral gains. This was the time to do it when you have, a backlash, quite frankly, to it appears the economy, maybe a little bit the border, but especially the price of goods. I think that really was weighing on a lot of people, and a lot of people voted their pocketbook. And there's no guarantee that's going to happen, next time or in 4 years. And if you're a Republican holding your ground, maybe I don't know if that's good enough. Because it's both state legislative level, but also congressional level. The Democrats kept their 14-3 majority in the Illinois state delegation, and that, and we're going to look at the district level numbers, but it looks like a lot of these candidates outran, Kamala Harris, these Democrats, which, makes you question, if Republicans had maybe put a little bit more money and invested in these races, could there have been a different story on election night there? I mean, and again, it goes back to the structural disadvantages, at least at the state level, of, Republicans, you can ride a wave, but you can't just ride the wave. Like you have to be ready to ride the wave.
There was first of all, recruitment for this kind of race and the backing. Let's just look at Budzinski. I mean, the Joshua Lloyd operation in the 13th congressional district the Metro East had its own parts. He had his home territory there in the Verdon area. It just wasn't extensive. It was nowhere near the type of campaign that like Regan Deering ran 2 years ago. And Budzinski was still leagues ahead of her in that race. And we saw it play out in the polls, and we see the growth there. But I mean, there's just, for a candidate running in a race like the 13th, the map is completely different. The map is completely different from what Rodney Davis ran in, but that's just it. He had no support and no backing from the very get-go. And that just showed extensively when, truth be told, there were 2 Lloyd signs across. I know there's debate over what a yard sign actually does in a campaign. There were 2 Joshua Lloyd signs in the entirety of Sangamon County. Like it's just something that you have to move forward with, and it's difficult, and you have to build from the ground up in this sense.
I mean, straight up, Republicans did not contest that seat.
Yeah.
I mean, Joshua Lloyd was not recruited by anybody. He was just a guy that was motivated to run, and that's a good thing. We want people to run.
Yeah.
We want competitive elections. But he raised no money. He got no help from the National Party in terms of spending money on TV ads or even just on consulting and advising. And
I hope that didn't come off as like a hit on him. It's like you said, he's a veteran that got engaged. When I had him on my show, he said, look, I tried to call my representation and I didn't get an answer. And that frustrated me, and I wanted to go to DC to do it. That's like a very traditional political story for somebody to get into.
Right.
And there's that spark for probably a lot of people that are frustrated with the system, but if they don't have the support of the party to prop them up for a race as big as Congress, then that's your...
And a lot of it, this might be some inside baseball, but like in a lot of these competitive or semi-competitive seats, the national parties will try to do some candidate recruitment. Like they will talk to people in the district, like, hey, are you interested in running? Usually they want to look at the bench of candidates in the district. They'll look at the legislature, they'll look at community leaders, et cetera. That really didn't happen in this case. And then in a case like the 17th district up in Northwest Illinois, where Congressman Eric Sorensen, a Democrat, was reelected, Republicans tried to recruit a candidate, but a lot of their top choices passed on the race. They settled on a retired judge, Joe McGraw, who, he ran a good race, but he didn't raise a lot of money. And you could argue about some of the messaging that was coming from his campaign. And again, but that's a district where we'll have to look at the data, but I'm sure, Sorensen probably, did much better than Kamala Harris did there.
Oh, yeah. Well, Brendan, I want to let you go. We've talked long enough about this kind of stuff, but
could do this all day.
Probably could do it all day. Probably going to be doing it for much longer. But Brendan Moore with Lee Enterprises, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate you, Cole.
We'll be right back with an interview with Pat Devaney from the AFL-CIO to talk about veto session next week and some of the pension reforms that unions are pushing for. We'll be right back.